The gunshot echoed through the dusty streets of Willow Creek as Rachel Harrington clutched her swollen belly and ducked behind a water trough, her heart pounding in her chest. It was 1876, and the promise of a new life in the West had turned into a nightmare. 6 months pregnant and on the run, she had earned a reputation in every town from Missouri to Colorado. Trouble, they called her, though few knew her real name or story. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the main street as Rachel caught her breath, her red gold hair falling loose from beneath her worn bonnet. She'd been in Willow Creek for less than a day, and already the bounty hunter had found her. Her husband's debts shouldn't have been her burden to bear, especially not after he'd abandoned her with a child growing inside her, but the world rarely concerned itself with what was fair. "Come out, Mrs. Harrington." The bounty hunter called, his voice slicing through the tense silence that had fallen over the street. "Your husband's creditors are mighty interested in having a word with you." Rachel closed her eyes and pressed her palm against her belly, feeling the baby move beneath her touch. "I'm sorry, little one," she whispered. "Your mama's gotten us into quite a fix." "Stay where you are," a deep voice commanded from behind her. Rachel whirled around, nearly losing her balance as she faced a tall man with sun-bronzed skin and piercing blue eyes. He wore a dusty Stetson pulled low over his forehead, and his weathered duster marked him as a man who spent his days in the saddle. "I'm not looking for trouble," Rachel said, instinctively backing away. The stranger's mouth quirked up at one corner. "From what I hear, trouble's looking for you." He glanced at her pregnant belly and then back to her face. "Name's Isaac Young. I own the Cross Y Ranch outside town, and you're the answer to my prayers." Before Rachel could respond, Isaac drew his revolver and fired a shot into the air. "Dawson," he called out to the bounty hunter. "This woman's under my protection now. Whatever business you have with her, you can take it up with me." The bounty hunter, a square-jawed man with cold eyes, paused in the middle of the street. "This ain't your affair, Young. The woman's got debts to settle." "Consider them settled," Isaac replied, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small pouch that clinked with the sound of coins. He tossed it into the street. "That should cover whatever you're owed, plus your trouble. Now ride out before I decide you're trespassing on my time." The tension hung in the air for a long moment before Dawson stooped to retrieve the pouch, weighing it in his palm before tucking it inside his vest. "Mighty generous of you," Dawson said, his eyes narrowing. "But if this doesn't cover it, I'll be back." "I expect you won't," Isaac replied evenly. After the bounty hunter had mounted his horse and disappeared down the road in a cloud of dust, Rachel turned to her unexpected savior. "Why would you do that?" she demanded, suspicion coloring her voice. "You don't know me." Isaac's blue eyes met hers directly. "I need a wife, Mrs. Harrington." "And you need protection." Rachel took a step back, one hand going protectively to her belly. "I'm not interested in becoming anyone's wife again. My last marriage taught me all I need to know about putting my trust in a man." "Not that kind of wife," Isaac clarified, his expression serious. "I need someone to care for my daughter. Her mother died 2 years ago, and the woman I hired as her caretaker is leaving to get married. I've been searching for someone trustworthy, but decent women willing to come to a remote ranch are scarce out here." "And you think a pregnant woman running from a bounty hunter is decent?" Rachel asked incredulously. Isaac studied her for a moment. "I think a woman willing to face down that much trouble to protect her unborn child has more decency than most." He gestured toward her belly. "I'm offering you a safe place to have your baby and raise it, Mrs. Harrington. A home for both of you and honest work." Rachel hesitated, weighing her limited options. She had less than $5 to her name, nowhere to go, and a baby coming in 3 months. What would be expected of me? "Care for my 6-year-old daughter, Emma. Cook for the ranch hands and keep the house, that's all." He paused. "The arrangement would be purely practical. You'd have your own room, of course." "And when my baby comes?" Rachel asked. "Then you'll have 2 children to care for instead of 1, Isaac replied simply. "The offer includes your child." Rachel looked down the empty street, considering the dust trail left by the bounty hunter. He would return, she had no doubt about that. The money Isaac had given him might buy her a few days at most. "How far is your ranch?" she asked finally. "Half a day's ride. We can leave at first light." He gestured toward the hotel across the street. "I've got a room there for the night, you can have it." "I'll bunk with my foreman at the livery." Rachel studied him carefully, searching for any sign of deception. His offer seemed too good to be true, but she was running out of options. "Why should I trust you?" Isaac's expression softened slightly. "Because I'm trusting you with my daughter, Mrs. Harrington, and that's not something I do lightly." That night, as Rachel lay in the hotel bed staring at the ceiling, she placed her hands on her swollen belly and felt the baby kick. "What do you think, little one?" she whispered. "Should we take a chance on Mr. Young and his ranch?" The baby kicked again, as if in response. "I suppose we don't have many better offers at the moment." Morning came with a brilliant sunrise that painted the plains in gold. Rachel had slept better than she had in months, despite her uncertainty. When she came downstairs, Isaac was already waiting in the hotel lobby, his tall frame commanding the attention of the room without seeming to try. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, taking her small carpet bag from her hand. "Better than I expected," Rachel admitted. "Good, it's a long ride to the ranch." He guided her outside where two horses waited, a sturdy chestnut mare and a powerful black stallion. "Can you ride in your condition?" Rachel nodded. "I grew up on a farm in Missouri. I was riding before I could walk." Isaac seemed pleased by this information. "The mare's gentle. She'll carry you safely." The journey to the Cross Y Ranch took them through rolling grasslands dotted with wildflowers and across a wide, shallow river. As they rode, Rachel learned that Isaac had come to Colorado 10 years earlier, working as a ranch hand before saving enough to buy his own land. He'd built the Cross Y from nothing into one of the most prosperous cattle operations in the county. "My wife, Caroline, died of fever 2 years ago," Isaac explained as they rode side by side. "Emma was only 4. She doesn't remember much about her mother now." "I'm sorry," Rachel said quietly. "That must be difficult for both of you." Isaac nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "Emma needs a woman's guidance. I can teach her to ride and to be strong, but there are things a father can't provide." As the sun climbed higher, they crested a hill, and Rachel caught her first glimpse of the Cross Y. The main house was larger than she'd expected, a 2-story structure built of solid timber with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. Several outbuildings clustered nearby, and a large barn stood adjacent to a corral where horses grazed. Beyond stretched fenced pastures where cattle dotted the landscape. "It's beautiful," Rachel said, genuine admiration in her voice. "It's home," Isaac replied simply, but she could hear the pride in his voice. As they approached the house, a small figure burst through the front door and ran toward them, blonde braids flying. "Papa!" the little girl cried, her face lighting up with joy. Isaac dismounted in one fluid motion and caught his daughter as she launched herself into his arms. He swung her around, her delighted laughter filling the air before setting her down gently. "Emma, this is Mrs. Harrington," he said, turning toward Rachel. "She's going to be taking care of you now that Mrs. Peterson is leaving." Emma regarded Rachel with curious blue eyes, her father's eyes taking in the sight of her swollen belly with interest. "Are you having a baby?" she asked directly. Rachel couldn't help but smile at the child's forthrightness. "Yes, I am, in about 3 months. Will it be a boy or a girl?" Emma asked. "I don't know yet," Rachel replied. "We'll have to wait and see." Emma considered this for a moment. "I hope it's a girl. Boys are too noisy." Isaac helped Rachel dismount, his strong hands steady at her waist. "Let's get you settled. Emma can show you around the house while I take care of the horses." The main house was comfortably furnished, though Rachel could see it needed a woman's touch. Mrs. Peterson, a gray-haired woman with kind eyes, showed Rachel to her room, a spacious chamber on the 2nd floor with windows overlooking the distant mountains. "It's the second-best bedroom in the house," Mrs. Peterson explained. "Mr. Young insisted you have it because of the baby. Said you'd need the space." Rachel ran her hand over the solid pine dresser. "It's more than generous." Mrs. Peterson studied her thoughtfully. "Mr. Young is a good man, Mrs. Harrington, one of the best I've known. He works hard and treats his people fairly." She hesitated. "The ranch hands might be curious about you at first, but they'll respect you as long as you do right by Emma and keep the household running smoothly." "I appreciate the advice," Rachel said. And please call me Rachel. Martha, the older woman offered in return. I'll be here for another week to show you how things run before I leave for Denver to marry my William. Her eyes twinkled. Been waiting 30 years for that man to propose, and now that he has, I'm not wasting another day. Over the next few days, Rachel threw herself into learning the rhythms of the ranch. She woke before dawn to help prepare breakfast for the ranch hands, learned which supplies were kept where, and began to form a bond with young Emma, who followed her around asking endless questions about the baby. Isaac kept his distance, spending his days out on the range with his men and taking his meals quickly before returning to work. But Rachel often felt his eyes on her when he thought she wasn't looking, assessing how she was settling in. On her fourth night at the ranch, Rachel was sitting on the porch swing after Emma had gone to bed, enjoying the cool evening air and the vast canopy of stars overhead. The sound of Boot's steps on the wooden porch alerted her to Isaac's presence before he spoke. "May I join you?" he asked, gesturing to the empty space beside her on the swing. Rachel nodded, shifting slightly to make room. They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, the only sound the creaking of the swing and the chorus of night insects. "Emma seems to have taken to you," Isaac said finally. "She's a wonderful child," Rachel replied. "Smart and curious, you've done well with her." Isaac's profile was illuminated by the soft glow from the lantern hanging by the door. "I've done my best, but it hasn't been enough. She needs more than I can give her." "Every child needs both nurturing and strength," Rachel said softly. "You've provided the strength. I'm happy to offer the nurturing for as long as I'm here." Isaac turned to look at her directly. "And how long will that be, Mrs. Harrington?" Rachel placed a protective hand on her belly. "I don't know, until it's safe for me to move on, I suppose." "And what exactly are you running from?" Isaac asked, his voice gentle but direct. "I think I've earned the right to know who might come looking for you on my land." Rachel sighed, knowing he deserved the truth. "My husband, Thomas Harrington, was a gambler and a dreamer, always chasing the next big opportunity." She looked out into the darkness. "We came west because he heard there was money to be made in mining. He borrowed heavily to stake his claim, putting up everything we owned as collateral." "I take it the mine didn't pan out," Isaac said. Rachel gave a bitter laugh. "There was no mine, just another con by men more skilled at deception than Thomas. When the creditors came calling, he disappeared in the night, left me to face them alone." Her voice hardened. "With a note saying he'd send for me when he struck it rich somewhere else." "And the baby?" Isaac asked quietly. "He doesn't know," Rachel said, her hand moving protectively over her belly. "I discovered I was expecting after he left." Isaac was silent for a long moment. "The man who was following you in town, is he working for these creditors?" Rachel nodded. "They believe I know where Thomas is hiding, or that he'll come back for me eventually." "And do you know where he is?" "No," Rachel said firmly, "and even if I did, I wouldn't go back to him. Not after he abandoned me." She turned to face Isaac directly. "I'm not running from my responsibilities, Mr. Young. I'm trying to protect my child from paying for its father's mistakes." Isaac studied her face in the lantern light. "I believe you, Mrs. Harrington." He paused. "Rachel." The sound of her name on his lips sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. "Thank you, Isaac." The next morning, Rachel woke to the sound of Emma's excited voice in the hallway. Pulling on her robe, she opened her door to find the little girl bouncing with enthusiasm. "Papa says we're going to town today," Emma announced. "All three of us, and we can visit the mercantile and maybe get candy if I'm good." Rachel smiled at the child's excitement. "That sounds wonderful, Emma. Let me get dressed and I'll help you choose your best dress for the occasion." An hour later, they set out for town in Isaac's wagon, Emma chattering happily between them on the seat. Rachel found herself enjoying the simple pleasure of the outing, the warm sun on her face and the spectacular mountain views that stretched before them. Willow Creek was bustling with activity when they arrived. As Isaac helped Rachel down from the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary, she became aware of curious glances from townspeople. A pregnant woman in the company of Isaac Young and his daughter was clearly a subject of interest. "Mrs. Harrington will need some things for the house," Isaac announced as they entered the mercantile. "And for herself and the baby when it comes. Put it all on my account, Mr. Patterson." The storekeeper, a balding man with spectacles perched on his nose, nodded respectfully. "Of course, Mr. Young, anything the lady needs." While Emma explored the candy jars with longing eyes, Rachel selected practical items, fabric for baby clothes, some personal necessities, and a few things to brighten the house. She was examining a bolt of soft flannel when she overheard two women whispering nearby. "That's her, the woman they call Trouble. Heard she showed up in town last week with a bounty hunter on her tail. And now she's living at Isaac Young's ranch with his daughter. Scandalous. They say her husband abandoned her, probably ran off when he found out the baby wasn't his." Rachel's cheeks burned with humiliation. She set down the fabric and was about to flee the store when she felt a strong hand at the small of her back. Isaac stood beside her, his expression thunderous as he stared down the gossiping women. "Mrs. Ellis, Mrs. Tanner," he said, his voice carrying throughout the now silent store. "I see you've noticed that Mrs. Harrington has joined my household as my daughter's caretaker. She comes with the highest recommendations, and I'm fortunate to have found someone of her character and capability." The women flushed, mumbling apologies before hurrying away. Isaac turned to Rachel, his blue eyes intense. "Don't let them trouble you," he said quietly. "Small towns run on gossip, but it dies down quickly enough when there's nothing to feed it." "They called me Trouble," Rachel said, her voice barely audible. Isaac's mouth quirked up at one corner. "Well, as I told you when we met, you're the answer to my prayers. And that counts for a good deal more than idle gossip." His words warmed something inside her that had been cold for too long. Before Rachel could respond, Emma bounded up with a small paper bag. "Papa bought me peppermint sticks," she announced happily. "And he said you can choose something too, Mrs. Harrington." Rachel smiled down at the little girl. "Did he now? Well, perhaps I'll have a peppermint stick as well. The baby seems to have a sweet tooth." As they left the mercantile, a tall man in a black suit approached them, his expression grave. "Mr. Young," he said with a nod. "A word, if you please." Isaac glanced at Rachel. "Take Emma to the wagon. I'll join you shortly." Rachel guided Emma across the street, but couldn't help glancing back to see Isaac engaged in what appeared to be a serious conversation. The man handed him a folded paper, which Isaac read with a deepening frown before tucking it into his pocket. When Isaac joined them at the wagon, his expression was carefully neutral, but Rachel could sense the tension in his shoulders. "Is everything all right?" she asked as he helped her up onto the seat. "Just some business matters," Isaac replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Nothing for you to worry about." The ride back to the ranch was quieter than their journey into town. Even Emma seemed to sense the change in her father's mood and sat subdued between them. When they arrived home, Isaac helped unload their purchases and then immediately headed for the barn, saying he needed to check on a sick calf. That evening, after Emma was tucked into bed, Rachel found Isaac in his study, a glass of whiskey in his hand as he stared at the paper spread out on his desk. "May I come in?" she asked from the doorway. Isaac looked up, his expression softening slightly at the sight of her. "Of course." Rachel entered the room, her hands clasped before her. "Isaac, if there's trouble because of me, I should know about it," he sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "It's not your fault, Rachel, but yes, there might be trouble coming." He picked up the paper from his desk. "This is a notice from the sheriff. Your husband's creditors have filed a legal claim against you, asserting that as his wife, you're responsible for his debts." Rachel sank into the chair across from him, her heart pounding. "They can't do that. I didn't sign any of those loans." "Under the law, they may have a case," Isaac said grimly. "Especially if you were living together as husband and wife when the debts were incurred." He paused. "The sheriff said there's a hearing scheduled next month in Denver. You're expected to attend." "I can't go to Denver," Rachel said, her hand going protectively to her belly. "I'll be nearly 8 months along by then." Isaac's jaw tightened. "I know, and even if you could travel safely, I wouldn't advise it. These men aren't interested in justice. They want someone to pay, and they've decided it's you." "What can I do?" Rachel asked, her voice small. Isaac studied her for a long moment, his blue eyes thoughtful. "There might be a solution, but it would require a significant commitment from both of us." "What kind of solution?" Isaac set down his whiskey glass and leaned forward. If you were no longer Thomas Harrington's wife, his creditors would have no legal claim on you. Rachel's brow furrowed. But I am his wife, until he's declared dead or, she stopped as understanding dawned. You're suggesting divorce. It's possible, Isaac said, but it would take time we don't have. There's another option that would be more immediate. He paused, clearly choosing his words carefully. If you were to remarry, your new husband would assume responsibility for your protection and welfare legally and otherwise. Rachel stared at him, stunned. Are you proposing marriage, Mr. Young? I am, Isaac replied steadily. A marriage of convenience, to be clear, to protect you and your child from these creditors. But why would you do that? Rachel asked, bewildered. Take on someone else's debts. Someone else's child, because Emma needs you, Isaac said simply. And because I believe in doing what's right. He hesitated. It needn't be forever, Rachel. Once the baby is born and the danger has passed, we could quietly arrange an annulment if that's what you wish. Rachel's mind whirled with the implications. Marriage to Isaac would certainly solve her immediate problems. It would give her child a name, a home, protection. But it would also bind her to a man she barely knew in a commitment that, temporary or not, she couldn't take lightly. I need time to think, she said finally. Isaac nodded. Of course, but we don't have much time, Rachel. The sheriff mentioned that your husband's creditors are planning to come to Willow Creek next week to press their case. Rachel rose from her chair, one hand at the small of her back as she balanced her pregnant weight. I'll give you my answer tomorrow. That night, Rachel lay awake long after the household had gone quiet, her thoughts in turmoil. Marriage to Isaac would be practical, sensible even. He was a good man, that much was evident in the way he treated his daughter, his workers, and even Rachel herself. He wasn't asking for love or even affection, just a mutually beneficial arrangement. Yet something in her resisted the idea of another loveless marriage, even one entered into with clear eyes and honest intentions. Her first marriage had begun with love, or what she'd thought was love, and ended in betrayal and abandonment. Could she trust herself to make a better choice this time? As dawn broke, Rachel made her decision. She dressed carefully and went downstairs to find Isaac already at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in his hand and dark circles under his eyes, suggesting he'd slept as poorly as she had. Good morning, she said softly. Isaac looked up, his expression guarded. Good morning. Rachel poured herself a cup of tea and sat across from him. I've been thinking about your proposal. And, Isaac asked, his voice carefully neutral. I'll marry you, Rachel said, but I have conditions. Isaac set down his coffee cup. I'm listening. First, this is a temporary arrangement, as you suggested. Once the baby is born and the danger from Thomas's creditors has passed, we'll reassess. She took a deep breath. Second, I won't share your bed. This is a marriage in name only. Isaac nodded, his expression unreadable. Understood. Third, Rachel continued, her voice softening slightly, I want your promise that my child will be treated with the same care and consideration you show Emma, even though it isn't yours by blood. You have my word, Isaac said without hesitation. No child under my roof will ever know anything but kindness and respect. Rachel studied his face, seeing nothing but sincerity in his blue eyes. Then we have an agreement, Mr. Young. Isaac extended his hand across the table. We do, Mrs. Soon-to-be Young. Rachel placed her hand in his, feeling the rough calluses on his palm and the gentle strength in his grip. A strange flutter that had nothing to do with the baby moved through her chest as their eyes met over their clasped hands. They were married 3 days later in a small ceremony at the ranch, with only Emma, the ranch hands, and the circuit preacher as witnesses. Rachel wore a simple blue dress that Martha Peterson had helped alter to accommodate her pregnancy, and Isaac looked uncommonly handsome in a clean black suit and freshly trimmed hair. As they spoke their vows, Rachel was struck by the solemnity in Isaac's voice as he promised to protect and cherish her. Though this was a marriage of convenience, he spoke the words as if he meant everyone. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Isaac surprised her by bringing her hand to his lips and pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Mrs. Young, he said softly, his blue eyes warm. Emma was delighted by the wedding, dancing around them in her best dress and throwing wildflowers she'd gathered that morning. "Does this mean you're my new mother?" she asked Rachel hopefully. Rachel knelt carefully to the child's level. "I'm your father's wife now, Emma. And I care for you very much. What you call me is up to you." The little girl considered this seriously before breaking into a smile. "I think I'll call you Mama Rachel. Is that all right?" Rachel felt tears spring to her eyes. "That's more than all right, sweet girl. That's perfect." That night, after the celebration had wound down and Emma was asleep, Rachel stood awkwardly in the hallway between her room and Isaac's. "Well," she said, suddenly shy, "I suppose this is good night, Mr. Young." Isaac smiled slightly. "I believe you can call me Isaac now, Mrs. Young." "We are married after all." Rachel found herself returning his smile. "Good night, Isaac." "Good night, Rachel," he replied, his voice deep and warm. "Sleep well." As she closed her bedroom door, Rachel pressed a hand to her racing heart, wondering at the peculiar emotions stirring within her. This was a practical arrangement, nothing more. Yet she couldn't deny the warmth that spread through her when Isaac looked at her, or the sense of rightness she felt under his roof. The next morning, Rachel came downstairs to find Isaac and Emma at the breakfast table, looking up at her with matching expressions of anticipation. "Good morning," she said, puzzled by their behavior. "Is something happening today that I should know about?" Isaac gestured to an envelope on the table. "A letter came for you from Denver." Rachel's heart sank as she picked up the envelope. "Thomas's creditors?" "No," Isaac said, his expression unreadable. "It's addressed to Mrs. Rachel Young, and it's from the Colorado Territory Land Office." Confused, Rachel opened the envelope and scanned the official-looking document inside. As she read, her eyes widened in disbelief. "Isaac," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What is this?" Isaac met her gaze steadily. "A wedding gift. 20 acres of land adjacent to the Cross Y, registered in your name. Your name alone, Rachel." Rachel stared at him in shock. "But why?" "So that no matter what happens between us, you and your child will always have a home and means of support," Isaac replied simply. "The land is good for farming or raising horses, whatever you might choose to do with it." Emma bounced in her seat. "Papa says I can help you pick where to build a house if you want one. Can we go see it today, please?" Rachel looked from the excited child to Isaac's serious face, overwhelmed by the magnitude of his gift. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes to showing Emma the land," Isaac suggested with a small smile. "She's been talking about it all morning." Later that day, as they rode to the edge of Isaac's property, Rachel was still processing the implications of his gift. The land deed represented more than property. It was independence, security, freedom. Things she had never truly possessed, even before her marriage to Thomas. They stopped at the crest of a gentle hill overlooking a stream. Wildflowers dotted the lush grass, and a stand of cottonwood trees provided shade along the water's edge. "This is it," Isaac said, dismounting and helping Rachel down from her horse. "Your land begins here and extends to those trees in the distance." Rachel turned in a slow circle, taking in the beauty of the landscape. "It's magnificent." Emma had already run ahead, chasing butterflies in the tall grass. "This would be a perfect place for a house, Mama Rachel," she called. "You could see forever from here." As Rachel watched the little girl, her throat tightened with emotion. In less than 2 weeks, Emma had worked her way firmly into Rachel's heart with her openness and affection. "She's right," Isaac said, coming to stand beside Rachel. "The view is unmatched. And it's close enough to the main house that Emma could visit whenever she likes." Rachel turned to look at him, studying the strong lines of his profile as he gazed out over the land. "Why are you really doing this, Isaac? All of it the marriage, this land." "It's far more than our agreement required." Isaac was quiet for a long moment. "When Caroline died, I thought the best parts of my life died with her," he said finally. "I focused on building the ranch, on providing for Emma. I told myself that was enough." He turned to face Rachel directly. "But it wasn't. Emma needs more than just provision. She needs a family, and perhaps I do too." "Is that what we are?" Rachel asked softly. "A family." Isaac's blue eyes held hers. "We could be, in time." Before Rachel could respond, Emma came running back, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "Papa, I found a rabbit nest with babies. Come see." As Isaac allowed himself to be pulled away by his daughter, Rachel placed a hand on her belly, feeling the baby move beneath her palm. "What do you think, little one?" she whispered. "Could this be our home? Could these be our people?" The baby kicked in response, as if to say yes. The next week passed in a blur of activity as Rachel settled into her role as Isaac's wife and mistress of the Cross Y. The ranch hands, initially curious about the sudden marriage, quickly accepted her presence as they saw how she eased their boss's burden and brought joy to Emma. Isaac remained respectful of her boundaries, never pressing for more than she was ready to give. Yet Rachel found herself increasingly aware of him, the sound of his voice as he gave instructions to his men, the strength in his hands as he worked with the horses, the rare but warming sight of his smile when Emma made him laugh. One evening, as Rachel sat on the porch mending one of Emma's dresses, Isaac joined her, settling into the chair beside her with a contented sigh. "The ranch hands tell me the north pasture is looking better than it has in years," he said. "We should have good grazing through the fall." Rachel smiled, setting aside her sewing. "That's wonderful news." They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "I received word from the sheriff today," Isaac said finally. "Thomas's creditors arrived in town yesterday. They've been asking questions about you." Rachel's hands tightened in her lap. "What kind of questions?" "The usual, where you're staying, whether you're still using the Harrington name." Isaac's expression darkened. "The sheriff told them you're Mrs. Young now, legally married and under my protection. He suggested they take their grievances back to Denver." "Do you think they'll leave?" Rachel asked, her voice tight with anxiety. Isaac reached over and covered her hand with his own. "If they're smart, they will, but men like that often aren't burdened with an abundance of intelligence." Rachel managed a small smile at his dry tone. "What if they come here?" "Then they'll find themselves unwelcome," Isaac said firmly. "Very unwelcome." The fierceness in his voice sent a shiver down Rachel's spine, not of fear, but of something else entirely, something that felt dangerously like attraction. "I don't want to bring trouble to your door," she said softly. Isaac's thumb traced a gentle pattern on the back of her hand. "You heard what I said when we met, Rachel. You're the answer to my prayers, not trouble." Rachel looked down at their joined hands, her heart beating faster at the simple touch. "I'm beginning to think you might be the answer to mine as well," she admitted quietly. Isaac's eyes darkened at her words, and for a moment Rachel thought he might kiss her. Instead, he lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her palm that sent warmth spiraling through her. "Get some rest," he said, his voice low. "Tomorrow's likely to be a long day." Isaac's prediction proved accurate. Shortly after noon the next day, 3 riders approached the ranch house. Rachel, who had been helping Emma with her reading lesson, felt her blood run cold when she recognized the man in the lead, Davis Miller, Thomas's primary creditor and the owner of the mining supply company where he'd run up his largest debts. "Stay inside with Emma," Isaac instructed as he strode toward the door, his expression grim. "Lock the door behind me," Rachel nodded, gathering Emma close as Isaac stepped out onto the porch to meet the unwelcome visitors. Through the window, she watched as the men dismounted, Miller's bulldog face set in lines of determination as he addressed Isaac. Though she couldn't hear the words exchanged, the confrontation was clearly heated. Miller jabbed a finger toward the house, his face reddening as Isaac stood immovable, arms crossed over his chest. When Miller took a step toward the porch, Isaac's hand moved to rest on the revolver at his hip. The warning was clear, and Miller stopped in his tracks. After another minute of tense conversation, the men remounted their horses. As they rode away, Miller turned in his saddle to glare at the house, his expression promising that this wasn't over. When Isaac came back inside, his jaw was tight with anger. "They claim Thomas Harrington owes them over $5,000, he said, his voice low enough that Emma, now absorbed in her book, couldn't hear. "They don't accept that our marriage nullifies their claim on you." Rachel's hand went to her throat. $5,000, that's impossible. Thomas couldn't have borrowed that much. "I suspect the actual debt has been inflated considerably," Isaac agreed. "These vultures see a chance to extort money, and they're not about to let it go easily." What do they want from me? Rachel asked, information on Thomas's whereabouts primarily. They believe you know where he is. Isaac's expression darkened. Miller also suggested that if you couldn't pay with information, there were other ways a woman could settle a debt. Rachel blanched, instinctively wrapping her arms around her belly. Isaac's eyes softened as he took in her fear. They won't touch you, Rachel, I swear it, he hesitated. But this situation may be more dangerous than I anticipated. Miller isn't the type to give up easily. What do we do? Rachel asked. For now, you and Emma stay close to the house. I'll have the men keep watch, and I've sent word to the sheriff. Isaac ran a hand through his hair in frustration. If we had proof that Thomas is alive, it would help. These men couldn't press their claim against you if they knew he was out there somewhere. Rachel bit her lip, a memory surfacing. I might have something, she said slowly. Thomas sent a letter about 2 months ago from California, I think. I kept it, thinking it might be important someday. Isaac's eyes sharpened with interest. Do you still have it? Rachel nodded. It's in my carpet bag, I'll get it. The letter, when she retrieved it, was crumpled and water-stained, but Thomas's handwriting was unmistakable. It was brief, filled with his usual empty promises and grandiose plans, but crucially, it was dated less than 2 months earlier and postmarked from Sacramento. This proves he's alive and well, Isaac said, studying the letter, and not under any duress that would prevent him from paying his own debts. Will it be enough? Rachel asked. Isaac folded the letter carefully. It should be. I'll take it to the sheriff tomorrow. With this evidence, he can warn Miller and his men that pursuing you further could constitute harassment. That night, after Emma was asleep, Rachel found herself unable to rest. The confrontation with Miller had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. When she heard movement downstairs, she wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and went to investigate, finding Isaac in the kitchen with a cup of coffee. You should be sleeping, he said when he saw her. So should you, Rachel countered, moving to sit across from him at the table. Isaac sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. I was just thinking about tomorrow. I don't like the idea of leaving you and Emma here while I ride into town. We'll be fine, Rachel assured him. The ranch hands will be working nearby, and I know how to use a rifle if necessary. Isaac looked up sharply. You do? Rachel smiled slightly. I grew up on a farm, remember? My father taught all his daughters to shoot, said a woman alone needs to be able to protect herself. Wise man, your father, Isaac commented. He was, Rachel agreed, a touch of sadness in her voice. He died when I was 16. Pneumonia took him in less than a week. I'm sorry, Isaac said softly. And your mother? She followed him a year later. People said it was her heart, but I think it was grief. Rachel traced a pattern on the wooden tabletop. My older sister was already married, so I went to live with her and her husband in St. Louis. That's where I met Thomas. Isaac studied her face in the lamplight. You loved him. It wasn't a question, but Rachel answered anyway. I thought I did. He was charming and full of dreams. After the quiet discipline of my sister's household, his adventurous spirit seemed exciting. She smiled ruefully. I mistook recklessness for courage and smooth words for honesty. We all make mistakes in judgment, Isaac said, especially when we're young. What about you? Rachel asked. How did you meet Caroline? A soft smile touched Isaac's lips. She was the school teacher in the town where I was working as a ranch hand. I saw her walking home one day, carrying a stack of books that looked too heavy for her. I offered to help. His eyes grew distant with memory. She told me she didn't need help, but if I wanted to walk with her and discuss Charles Dickens, I was welcome to. She sounds remarkable, Rachel said. She was, Isaac agreed. Stubborn, passionate about education, and completely unimpressed by traditional notions of a woman's place. She challenged me every day of our marriage. His expression softened. Emma is very much like her. You must miss her terribly, Rachel said. Isaac was quiet for a moment. I did. For a long time the pain was so constant I could hardly breathe around it. He looked up, meeting Rachel's eyes directly. But lately, I've found myself thinking more about the future than the past. The intensity in his gaze made Rachel's heart beat faster. Isaac, before she could continue, a sound from outside caught their attention, the distinct crack of a rifle shot, followed by shouting. Isaac was on his feet instantly, moving to the rack by the door where his rifle was kept. Stay here, he ordered, his voice hard with tension. Lock the door behind me. What about Emma? Rachel asked, her heart pounding with fear. Get her and bring her downstairs. Stay away from the windows. Isaac checked his rifle and headed for the door. If anyone tries to enter who isn't me or one of my men, shoot first and ask questions later. After he left, Rachel hurried upstairs to Emma's room, finding the little girl already awake and frightened by the commotion. What's happening, Mama Rachel? She asked, her blue eyes wide with fear. Just some trouble with the cattle, I think, Rachel lied, forcing a reassuring smile. Your papa asked us to wait downstairs for a while. Bring your blanket, we can make a nest on the sofa. As they descended the stairs, more shots rang out, these closer to the house. Emma whimpered and Rachel pulled her close. It's all right, sweetheart. Your papa will take care of everything. They huddled together on the sofa, Rachel keeping her body between Emma and the windows. The ranch house had gone ominously quiet, with only occasional shouts breaking the silence. Then came the sound of boots on the porch steps, followed by a heavy knock at the door. Rachel. It's me, Isaac called. Relief flooded through her as she hurried to unlock the door. Isaac stood there, his face grim, a streak of blood on his sleeve. You're hurt, Rachel exclaimed. It's just a graze, Isaac dismissed, though his expression remained tense. Miller and his men tried to rustle some cattle as a distraction while they approached the house. Devereaux caught them in time. Are they gone? Rachel asked, clutching Emma's hand tightly. For now, Isaac said, but they'll be back. Miller's not the type to accept defeat easily. His words proved prophetic. Over the next week, there were more incidents of fence cut on the north pasture, a fire set in one of the outlying hay barns, shots fired at ranch hands riding the boundary. Isaac increased the watches and sent Emma to stay with Martha Peterson in town, despite the little girl's tearful protests. Rachel, now nearly 7 months pregnant, found herself constantly on edge, jumping at every sound and unable to sleep through the night. One evening, as she stood at the kitchen window watching the sunset, she made a decision. When Isaac came in from the stables, she was waiting for him at the kitchen table, Thomas's letter in front of her. I need to go to Sacramento, she said without preamble. Isaac froze in the doorway. What? To find Thomas, Rachel clarified. If I can bring him back to face his creditors, or at least get him to pay what he truly owes them, this nightmare would end. Absolutely not, Isaac said flatly. You're 7 months pregnant, Rachel. You can't possibly make such a journey. I can't stay here and watch your ranch be destroyed because of my problems, Rachel insisted. Every day Miller and his men grow bolder. It's only a matter of time before someone gets seriously hurt or killed. Isaac strode to the table, his expression thunderous. And what exactly do you plan to do if you find Thomas? Ask him nicely to come back and face his responsibilities. The man abandoned his pregnant wife, Rachel. He's not likely to suddenly develop a conscience. I have to try, Rachel said stubbornly. I won't put you and Emma in danger any longer. Isaac's expression softened as he took in the determination in her face. He pulled out a chair and sat across from her, taking her hands in his. Rachel, listen to me. You and your baby are my family now. I will protect you both with everything I have. His grip tightened. I didn't marry you just to send you off to chase a man who didn't deserve you in the first place. The vehemence in his voice startled her. Isaac, no, he interrupted. I have a better plan. Miller and his men are growing desperate. The sheriff has warned them repeatedly, and they know they're running out of legal options. If we can hold out a little longer, they'll either give up or make a mistake that allows the law to deal with them permanently. Rachel shook her head. And in the meantime, more of your property destroyed. More of your men at risk. The property can be rebuilt, and my men know the risks. Isaac's blue eyes held hers intently. What matters to me is keeping you safe, you and the baby. Something in his expression made Rachel's breath catch. Why, she whispered, why does it matter so much to you? Isaac was silent for a long moment, still holding her hands in his. Because somewhere along the way, he said finally, his voice rough with emotion, this stopped being just an arrangement of convenience for me. Rachel's heart began to pound. What are you saying? I'm saying that I care for you, Rachel, more than I expected to, more than is probably wise given the circumstances. He released her hands and stood up as if needing distance. I know that wasn't part of our agreement. I know you're still healing from what Thomas did to you. But I can't pretend my feelings don't exist. Rachel sat frozen, overwhelmed by his confession. For weeks, she'd been fighting her own growing attraction to Isaac, his quiet strength, his devotion to Emma, the gentle way he treated Rachel despite the trouble she'd brought to his door. But she'd been too afraid to acknowledge it, too scarred by her first marriage to trust her own heart. "Isaac," she began, unsure what she wanted to say. Before she could continue, the sound of hoofbeats approaching the house made them both tense. Isaac moved to the window, peering out into the gathering dusk. "It's Devereaux," he said, relief evident in his voice, "and he's riding hard." Isaac went to meet his foreman on the porch. Rachel followed, her conversation with Isaac momentarily set aside as she saw the urgency in Devereaux's manner. "Mr. Young," the foreman called as he dismounted. "Sheriff sent word. They caught Miller and one of his men trying to rob the bank in town. There was a shootout. Miller's dead." Rachel gasped, her hand going to her throat. "What about the others?" Isaac asked. "The other man with Miller was wounded and captured. The third one, Jackson, I think his name was, got away, but the sheriff has a posse after him." Devereaux removed his hat, wiping sweat from his brow. "Sheriff said to tell you it's over. With Miller dead and evidence they were planning to rob the bank, no one's going to pursue Mrs. Young about those debts." Relief washed over Rachel in a dizzying wave. "It's really over," she whispered. Isaac turned to her, his expression softening. "It appears so." That night, after sending word for Emma to return home the next day, Rachel sat on the porch swing, watching the stars emerge in the velvet sky. The relief of knowing Miller was no longer a threat was tempered by the uncertainty of her conversation with Isaac earlier. He cared for her. The knowledge filled her with a confused mix of joy and fear. Joy because in the quiet corners of her heart, she'd begun to care for him too. Fear because trusting her heart had led her astray before. The sound of the screen door opening alerted her to Isaac's presence before he spoke. "May I join you?" he asked, his voice quiet in the darkness. Rachel nodded, shifting to make room on the swing. Isaac sat beside her, the wooden frame creaking slightly under his weight. For a long moment they swung in silence, the only sounds the gentle creak of the chains and the chorus of night insects. "I owe you an apology," Isaac said finally, "for what I said earlier. It wasn't fair to burden you with my feelings, especially given our arrangement." Rachel turned to look at him, his profile illuminated by the soft glow from the lantern hanging by the door. "You don't need to apologize for being honest, Isaac." "Don't I?" he asked, his voice tinged with self-deprecation. "You came to me for protection, not complications." "Life is full of complications," Rachel said softly. "Sometimes the best ones are the ones we don't plan for." Isaac's gaze sharpened as he turned to face her. "What are you saying, Rachel?" She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I'm saying that I care for you too, Isaac." "I didn't expect to. I didn't want to. After Thomas, I wasn't sure I could trust my own judgment when it came to men." "And now?" Isaac asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Now I think perhaps I've learned to recognize the difference between empty charm and true character." Rachel's hand found his in the darkness. "You're a good man, Isaac Young, the best I've known." The swing stopped moving as Isaac turned fully toward her, his free hand coming up to touch her cheek with exquisite gentleness. "Rachel," he said, her name like a prayer on his lips. When he kissed her, it was soft and questioning, giving her every chance to pull away. But Rachel leaned into the kiss, her heart soaring with a joy she'd forgotten was possible. Isaac's arms encircled her, mindful of her pregnant belly, holding her as if she were something precious and rare. When they finally broke apart, Rachel rested her forehead against his, overwhelmed by the emotions coursing through her. "I never expected this," she whispered. "When I came to Willow Creek, I was just trying to survive." Isaac brushed a strand of hair from her face. "And now?" Rachel smiled, placing his hand over her belly where the baby was kicking vigorously. "Now I think I might be learning how to live again." The weeks that followed were the happiest of Rachel's life. With the threat from Miller gone, she could fully embrace her place at the Cross Y. Emma was delighted by the change in her father and Mama Rachel, dancing around them in circles when she caught them kissing in the kitchen. As Rachel's pregnancy advanced, Isaac became increasingly protective. insisting she rest frequently and assigning ranch hands to be within calling distance whenever he had to be away from the house. Rachel accepted his concern with good grace, touched by the depth of his care for her and her unborn child. They began to make plans for the future discussions about expanding the main house to accommodate their growing family, ideas for the land Isaac had given Rachel, dreams spoken softly in the darkness as they lay together in what was now their shared bedroom. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching Emma chase fireflies in the yard, Isaac took Rachel's hand, his expression serious. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you," he said. Rachel smiled. "That sounds ominous." Isaac shook his head. "Not ominous, just important." He hesitated, seeming uncharacteristically nervous. "When the baby comes, I'd like to give it my name, legally, to adopt it as my own." Rachel's breath caught in her throat. "Isaac, I know we agreed this marriage was temporary at first," he continued quickly, "but that's not what I want anymore. I want us to be a real family, you, me, Emma, and this baby." His hand covered her rounded belly. "I want to be this child's father in every way that matters." Tears filled Rachel's eyes as she covered his hand with her own. "That's what I want too," she whispered, "more than anything." Isaac's face broke into a smile of such joy that it made Rachel's heart ache. "I love you, Rachel Young," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I think I've loved you since the day you stood behind that water trough and looked at me with those defiant green eyes." Rachel laughed through her tears. "And here I thought I was just trouble." Isaac pulled her close, his lips brushing her temple. "The very best kind of trouble, the kind that saves a man's soul." 2 weeks later, Rachel went into labor during a summer thunderstorm that rattled the windows of the ranch house and turned the roads to mud. Isaac sent one of the ranch hands racing for the doctor in town, but it quickly became apparent that the baby would arrive before help could reach them. With Martha Peterson and the cook's wife assisting, Rachel labored through the night, Isaac pacing anxiously outside the bedroom door until Martha finally lost patience and put him to work boiling water and tearing sheets into strips. As dawn broke, Rachel's daughter entered the world with a lusty cry that brought tears to Isaac's eyes as he held his wife's hand. "She's perfect," Martha announced, placing the swaddled infant in Rachel's arms, "strong lungs in all her fingers and toes." Rachel gazed down at her daughter's tiny face, overwhelmed with love. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We've been waiting for you." Isaac sat on the edge of the bed, his expression filled with wonder as he gently touched the baby's cheek. "She's beautiful," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "just like her mother." Rachel looked up at him, her heart so full it felt it might burst. "Would you like to hold your daughter?" Isaac's eyes widened. "My daughter." "Your daughter," Rachel confirmed, carefully transferring the bundle into his arms. "If you still want to be her father." Isaac cradled the infant with surprising confidence for a man who'd claimed to know little about babies. "More than anything in the world," he said, gazing down at the tiny face. "What shall we name her?" Rachel had been considering names for months, but in this moment only one seemed right. "Hope," she said softly, "because that's what she represents for all of us." "Hope Young," Isaac tested the name, smiling. "It's perfect." When Emma was finally allowed to meet her new sister later that day, her excitement knew no bounds. "She's so tiny," she exclaimed, peering at the baby with fascination. "When can she play with me?" Rachel laughed, stroking Emma's blonde hair. "Not for a while yet, sweetheart, but she'll grow quickly, and before you know it, she'll be following you everywhere." Emma beamed at this prospect. "I'm going to teach her everything, how to ride and how to read and how to catch frogs in the creek." Isaac chuckled. "I'm sure she'll be an excellent student." As Emma chattered on about all the things she would show her new sister, Rachel caught Isaac's eye over their daughters' heads. The love she saw there matched the fullness in her own heart, a love that had grown from the most unlikely beginning into something strong and true and enduring. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, Rachel stood on the hill overlooking the stream where her land adjoined the Cross Y. Hope was bundled warmly against her chest, and Emma danced ahead of them, pointing out interesting rocks and late-blooming wildflowers to her father. "What do you think?" Isaac asked, coming to stand beside Rachel. "Is this the spot?" Rachel surveyed the location, imagining the small farmhouse they planned to build there not as a separate residence, but as a place for guests and eventually, perhaps, for Emma or Hope when they were grown. "It's perfect," she said, leaning into his side as his arm encircled her waist. "We can see the main house from here and the view of the mountains is spectacular." Isaac pressed a kiss to her temple. "We'll break ground in the spring. By next winter it will be finished." Rachel smiled up at him. "There's no rush. We have all the time in the world," and they did. In the years that followed, the Cross Y flourished under their joint care. Hope grew into a spirited child with her mother's red-gold hair and her father's blue eyes. Emma became the accomplished young horsewoman Isaac had predicted, winning races at the county fair and helping to train the finest stock horses in Colorado. 2 years after Hope's birth, Rachel gave Isaac a son they named David, who inherited his father's quiet strength and his mother's determination. The family was complete, bound together not by blood alone, but by the love that had begun that day in Willow Creek when a pregnant woman called Trouble found that she was, indeed, the answer to a good man's prayers. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Isaac surprised Rachel with a leather-bound journal. Inside, on the first page, he had written, "To my beloved wife, who taught me that sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as trouble. Every day with you is an answered prayer." That night, as they stood on the porch of their home watching the sunset paint the Colorado sky in brilliant hues, Rachel leaned against her husband's solid strength and reflected on the journey that had brought her to this place of belonging. "What are you thinking about?" Isaac asked, his arms wrapped around her from behind, his chin resting on the top of her head. Rachel smiled, covering his hands with her own. "I was thinking about that day we met, how frightened I was, how desperate. And now," Isaac prompted. Rachel turned in his arms to face him, her green eyes meeting his blue ones with all the love in her heart. "Now I know that sometimes, when life seems darkest, you're actually standing at the threshold of everything you ever wanted but were afraid to hope for." Isaac's expression softened as he brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You know, when people in town used to talk about that trouble heading for the Cross Y, I had no idea they meant the woman who would save it and me along with it." Rachel laughed, rising on tiptoe to press her lips to his. "And I never imagined that a cowboy calling me the answer to his prayers would turn out to be the truest words I'd ever heard." As the last light of day faded from the sky and the first stars appeared overhead, they stood together in the gathering darkness, their love a beacon that had guided them home to each other, to family, to the life they had built together on the wild frontier where second chances were possible and love could heal even the deepest wounds.